क्या आप आईएएस की तैयारी कर रहे हैं और कोचिंग इंस्टीट्यूट्स को 2.5 लाख तक की फीस नहीं पे करना चाहते? अगर हाँ, तो 22,500 रुपए में घर बैठ के स्टडीआईक्यू के पेनड्राइव कोर्स के साथ आप आईएएस की तैयारी कर सकते हैं। आज ही विजिट करें studyIQ.com।
Hello my dear friends and welcome to StudyIQ. I am Joy C. Joy and today in this lecture we will discuss about reducing the oil dependency of India. Why is reducing oil dependency very important? What are the challenges in this regard? What are the government initiatives and measures taken in this regard? And further what has to be done? So all these topics will be covered under this lecture. Let us start. First of all, let us understand what is the issue or why is reducing oil dependency an important thing for India. Let us see what it is. The performance of Indian economy on various parameters like inflation, GDP, current account deficit, etc. are connected to the fluctuating oil prices. We are a highly import dependent economy in case of oil. So, the performance of Indian economy is highly dependent on oil imports, and the oil imports are highly influenced by the prices. So, the performance of Indian economy will depend on the prices of oil and also the dependency of oil, and therefore it is very significant for Indian economy and it requires a policy response in this regard. Let us take an example. So, recently we are experiencing an increase in the prices of oil. So as a result, what has happened? Oil is a component in almost all the sectors of Indian economy. So oil is very important, and with an increase in the prices of oil, the cost of production has increased. So when cost of production increases, what will happen? It will lead to cost push inflation in the economy. So cost push inflation means increase in the prices of commodities in the market due to an increase in the cost of production. So when price of oil increases, cost of production increases, and when cost of production increases, it leads to cost push inflation in the economy. And another impact is that when the cost of production increases, what will happen to the supply? The supply comes down because the production or quantity of production comes down. So when production comes down, the total output in the economy will come down. So GDP also will come down because GDP is measured in terms of total output in an economy. Now thirdly, an increase in the price of oil, and we have seen we are highly dependent on imports. The value of imports will go up. Why? Because now the price of oil is more and the import bill will increase. You have to pay more for purchasing oil. So value of imports will go up. So when the value of imports increases over the value of exports, what will happen? It will lead to widening of current account deficit. So now remember, because of high oil dependency, the performance of Indian economy can be affected on various parameters. We have now seen current account deficit, how it affects inflation, and how it affects the GDP or growth rate of the economy. So this dependency of oil has to be reduced if this issue has to be sorted out, and therefore it requires a policy response, and this is why it has become a very important current affair and a very important news for aspirants who are preparing for various competitive examinations. Now let us analyze what are the problems. The first one is regarding the volume of imports. 80% of India's oil demand is met by imports. This means that the domestic production is very less. Almost 80% is met through the imports and only 20% is met through domestic production. So this is a concern for India when the oil prices increases. So when oil prices increases, this 80% of the imports will be impacted in terms of increase in the price. And because of this, India has urged the oil producing countries like Saudi Arabia to reduce the cost of energy in order to aid the global economy in its path of recovery. So what was the response? The countries like Saudi Arabia, who are oil producing countries, they refuse to lower the oil prices. So if they do not agree to lower the oil prices, the prices will go up and it will impact the Indian economy in a negative manner, which we have already discussed. It affects the performance of the economy on various parameters. Remember, India is the fastest growing economy, and this can affect this tag of fastest growing economy in the world. Next problem is the dollar dependency. See, when we make imports from a country, we have to pay in terms of dollars. Why? Because Indian rupee is not an international currency. So, if it is not an international currency, it will not be acceptable in other countries other than the country of issue. So, Indian rupee is issued in India and it is not acceptable in many other countries, or it is not widely acceptable in many other countries except some neighboring countries or border areas. So, we can say that Indian rupee is not an international currency, or we have not undergone internationalization in terms of currency. So in that case, what will happen? We have to pay in terms of dollars. When we make imports, the payment is done in terms of dollars. So there will be more payment made in terms of dollars, which will depreciate the rupee and also which will decrease the forex reserves of the country. So what did India do? India had called for a review of payment terms. So what is meant by review of payment terms? Under the review, India demanded a partial use of rupee instead of dollars to pay for oil. Now we are paying in terms of oil, but now India requested whether we can pay a partial amount in terms of rupee in order to overcome the issue of depreciation and also lowering forex reserves. And this is also not happening. Why? Because there is an absence of significant rival suppliers in the global oil markets who are willing to help India. India is not an international currency and not acceptable all around the world. So this is also not happening. So now we have to pay all this import bills in terms of dollars. So the dollar dependency of India is also going up. In one side, the forex reserves of the country is coming down, and on the other, rupee is undergoing depreciation. So this is the impact. Now third one is the fall of rupee. We have seen when the value of import increases compared to the value of exports, it leads to current account deficit. So current account deficit is a measurement of trade where the value of imports are more than the value of exports. So what will happen when our import dependency increases? The current account deficit will widen. So now in the first quarter of 2018-19, the current account deficit has widened to 2.4% of the GDP. This is in the quarter 1. Now this is expected to increase to a 3% of GDP by the end of this financial year. So when the current account deficit of a country widens, it will lead to further depreciation of rupee. Now if we consider the depreciation of rupee has depreciated up to a percentage of 16. And it is not showing any signs of recovery. So already there is depreciation of rupee because of many other factors like outflow of foreign investment, increasing value of imports, etc. And on the top of that, when the oil bills or import bills increases, it will further depreciate the Indian currency. So all these factors, that is increasing import bill, increasing dollar dependency and depreciation of rupee, all these factors will negatively influence the Indian economy. It will have a negative influence. India is now the fastest growing economy in the world. So this will have a negative impact. Now let us understand what are the measures taken by the government in this regard in order to reduce the dependency on oil imports. The government had set a target in the year 2015 to reduce India's oil dependency by 10%. So in 2014-15 it was 77%. So the target of government was to make it to 67%, and the target was set to be achieved by 2022. But what happened? The import dependency has only increased since then because of rapid industrialization, urbanization, or the growth of different sectors of Indian economy. The oil dependency, import dependency has only increased. It did not come down. And along with that, there was a lack of domestic production. So import dependency increased, and also now the government is looking for new ways to raise domestic output. Why did the import dependency increase? One is because of the growth. When economy underwent rapid growth, the demands of the economy were high. And second reason was lack of domestic production. And secondly, the government had come up with certain reforms in this sector. Government initiated various reforms like open acreage, pricing reforms, liberalized licensing, etc. So this was to raise the domestic output, but this also had certain challenges, limitations, etc. and did not work well, and that is why the import dependency did not come down. So if the reforms worked really well, the import dependency would have come down because there is an increased production in the domestic level. Now the third one was private investment. Government was looking at private investment to raise the domestic oil and gas production. So it was beyond the capacity of the government to invest in this sector. So foreign and private investments were welcomed by the government. But here also no much improvements took place. The supply has stagnated for the last few years. But what happened to the demand? Demand has increased. So demand has increased around 5 to 6% annually and supply is stagnant. So as a result of this, what happened? The aggregate demand became more than the aggregate supply, and that is why the prices also increased. And the government also decided to cut the taxes. So recently government had marginally cut the taxes imposed on domestic fuel, but unfortunately it was also not able to make a significant difference to help the customers or consumers. The marginal cut in the taxes did not make much impact to the consumers. The inflation rate remained the same, did not change much. Now let us see what has to be done, what steps the government has to take. The first one is a steep cut in the central and state taxes. If there is a steep cut in the central and state taxes, the benefit will percolate into the consumers. If we look at the pricing mechanism, we will see that the central government imposes excise duty, and coming to the states, the state governments imposes VAT. So if there is a steep cut in both excise duty as well as value added tax imposed by the states and the center, the prices will come down, and this will help the consumers. So a marginal cut is not enough, it should be a steep cut. Now second one is to tap the domestic sources of energy supply. This is a long term and a viable solution. So if we are able to make utilization of the domestic sources of energy supply, this will reduce the import dependency of the country. This will ensure adequate supply of energy from within the domestic territory itself, and for that investment is required. The government will have to come up with attractive policy measures to attract investment from private sector and also from the foreign sector, and should be able to tap the domestic sources of energy supply. Now third solution is to adopt green alternatives. The consumers should be encouraged to switch to green alternatives, and for that also government will have to provide incentives. This will have a positive impact on the ecosystem as well as on oil import dependency. Now what can be done in the short run? The government can look into diversifying its international supplier base. So if the supplier base is diversified or extended, what will happen? The aggregate supply into the economy will increase, and with this increase in the aggregate supply, the supply will become more than the demand. So what will happen? The prices will come down. So in the short run, what government can think of doing is to increase the supplier base and thereby increasing the supply to the domestic market. This will have an impact in the short run, but in the long run, what has to be done? Domestic sources of energy supply should be tapped. You can find the PDF of this lecture on my Facebook page. Thank you.
क्या आप IAS की तैयारी कर रहे हैं और कोचिंग इंस्टीट्यूट्स को 2.5 लाख तक की फीस नहीं पे करना चाहते? अगर हाँ, तो 22,500 रुपए में घर बैठ के StudyIQ के पेन ड्राइव कोर्स के साथ आप IAS की तैयारी कर सकते हैं। आज ही विजिट करें studyiq.com।